I believe that hormonal birth control is one of the worst things to ever happen to women because it completely shuts off our ovulation. It also deters us from picking healthy partners because when you are on these synthetic hormones, your own ovulation is shut off and we don't actually have periods, we don't ovulate, and our hormones are different, so we are sensing and smelling different pheromones than if we were not being synthetically attacked. I have a couple girlfriends who when they got off birth control and they were with their partners for a long time, when they got off birth control, they smelled different to them. They were disgusted by them, which is really crazy, but there's studies now to show this. Like that was an anecdotal example, but there's studies that show that this is happening. And not to mention, it is masking symptoms of what is actually going on. So a lot of women are put on birth control when they're 13, 14 to control or balance their hormones. We're not balancing any hormones. What we're doing is we're just completely suppressing our own hormonal cycles and replacing them with synthetic ones. So if you have an issue going on there and then you just put a Band-Aid over it, it's not gonna go away.
Hey friends, welcome back. So today's show with Courtney Swan is brought to you by Myoscience Nutrition. As you can tell, we're talking a lot about practical ways to minimize your exposure to common persistent organic pollutants, also known as endocrine disrupting chemicals. Unfortunately, these compounds are in our food, air, water, clothing, furniture. They are everywhere. So that's why I lean upon the NAC Glycine Supreme by Myoscience. This is an amazing way to support your body's antioxidant activity and glutathione synthesis, as well as detoxification pathways and processes. What's unique about the NAC Glycine Supreme is the dose of both the NAC and glycine, which, as many of you know by now, these are two of the amino acid precursors that comprise the glutathione tripeptide. That is your body's most abundant antioxidant molecule. It's very important. And what I suggest, or how to practically implement this in your life, is if you have an occupational exposure where you're around cosmetics, cleaning products, even occupations where you use benzene, toluene, or different caustic agents like that, you might want to consider supporting your body's natural glutathione processes with the NAC Glycine Supreme, because the dose of both the NAC and glycine is 1.6 grams per serving, which is significantly higher than most of the other products out there. Most products are 400 or 600 milligram of just NAC. But there's really good evidence to suggest that pairing NAC and glycine together helps to optimize glutathione biosynthesis. So you can support your body's antioxidant activity as well as detoxification processes by going over to myoscience.com and checking out the NAC Glycine Supreme. I'll put links below. At checkout, you can save using the code podcast to save 15%. And there's a lot of reviews from real people just like you who are trying to optimize their health and how they're using this. For example, just a practical way to, if you want to think about how to use this, if you go out with friends or family, you have a glass or two of wine or a cocktail or something like that, you want to help to support your body's glutathione processes and maybe take one scoop before bed. Usually you want to support glutathione in the evening time, sometime after dinner and before bedtime. It doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes before bed or an hour before bed. There is some evidence to suggest that at the dose that you're getting of the glycine, you may support some healthy neurotransmitter synthesis that might induce a relaxation or calming response, because glycine has been shown to do that. But you can read some of the reviews over at myoscience.com, see what other people are saying and how they're using this, and figure out how to fit that into your lifestyle. So again, the URL is myoscience.com, myoscience.com, and use the coupon code podcast to save. So let's cut back to it with Courtney. So Courtney Swan, thank you so much for coming on the show. You and I have shared a lot of content on Instagram over the past couple of years, and I love that you're going to grocery stores and natural food stores and helping to better educate people about all of the hidden toxins that are in cosmetics, cleaning products, our food, cookware. So we have some props here, friends. This is not a sponsored video by any of these. They're just reminders to talking points for many folks need to be aware of this, because a lot of people are buying organic foods, going to farmers markets, spending a lot of money, but then they're cooking this on nonstick cookware, which could be leaking these chemicals. But before we sort of dive into that, you've been into this thanks to your mother for a long time. How did you get so into health and avoiding these chemicals in your food and environment and things like that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really love all the content that you put out, and I'm just grateful to be on your platform to share this. So my story starts with my mom. My mom lived in Boulder for a really long time, and I was telling you this before we were recording that she's really always been on food, ingredients, cookware, etc. from when I was a young kid. I remember going to friends' houses and seeing their Jiffy peanut butter and their Dunkaroos and all this stuff, and I'd come home and I had the off-brand natural cereals, I had the organic, just like ground peanuts. And at the time, I was really upset about it. My mom loves to tell me this now. She's like, aren't you so grateful that I set you up for this? And I am. And so I went to college. I experienced backwards what a lot of people, so basically, like, I feel like a lot of people get really sick and then this is how they find health. Well, it was the opposite for me, where I grew up with home cooked meals, and then I go to college, I gained like 15, 20 pounds because I was eating all the fast food that I was never exposed to as a kid because my mom was cooking everything from scratch, etc. And as a result, my mom started, she would cut out articles from the newspaper and physically mail them to me. And this was at the time between 2002 and 2006. And one of the things we were talking about was Teflon cookware. So she came out one time to visit me when I was in college and freaked out over me having this nonstick coated cookware. I remember when I would cook eggs, because you would have scratches in there because we weren't really paying attention to the utensils that we were using. You want to use plastic when you're using nonstick, but you don't want to use nonstick, period. Right. But if you are using it, you want to make sure you're not using metal because it scratches it. And it would release all these particles in the food. So when I would cook my eggs, there'd be all these like black sprinkled little pieces of the Teflon in the eggs, and that's because the coating was coming off and going into the food. And this is a huge concern because they contain something called PFAs, which are also forever chemicals, is what they're branded as. This is something that DuPont was infamous for making. It's what you find in nonstick cookware. It's also what's sprayed on anything that's water resistant, whether that's your clothing, your jackets, boots, whatever it is. And the problem is they're called forever chemicals because they don't break down ever in the environment. So that we're stuck with them. And what we're realizing is that they are causing, they're wreaking havoc on our endocrine systems. And this is a huge problem.
It's such a big deal. And it's something that we all need to be aware of. I just bought my daughter like a new ski jacket. Mm-hmm. So washing it and everything like that, I mean, maybe it gets rid of some of those things, but we should be concerned as parents, especially because young developing endocrine systems, people that want to have children need to be aware of this. I think towards the end I want to get into like elimination strategies and things like that. But first, so cookware is a big one, our clothing. I don't think people are aware that their furniture often has flame retardants. Yeah. And so washing new sheets that you get, making sure that if you're buying a new couch or something like that, that it doesn't have these flame retardants, because these perfluoro compounds, which I think are what comprise the water-resistant material, it's like a fluoride carbon mix. They're hard to get rid of, right? So.
Yeah, that's the whole problem. And like I was saying, because they are messing with our endocrine system, they are leading to things like cancer, infertility, thyroid, autoimmune disorders. They're affecting us on such a grand level, and I think a lot of people are not even aware that this is happening.
Right. Yeah, they feel fatigued, they go to the doctor, they're put on medication for whatever, depression, anxiety, low testosterone, but it's not really fixing the root cause. So the fragrances, I think you talk a lot about, especially women, cosmetics, lotions, makeup, things like that. That's another big source because we're applying that directly to the skin. What are some big no-nos to look out for there?
Yeah, well, first of all, our skin is our largest organ, and I think there's a misconception that we only need to be concerned about what's going in our mouth, but actually when you're applying things to your skin, it's essentially like you're applying it to your mouth because it's going directly to your bloodstream. And I also think that people have this misconception. We have this about food, we have this about products on the shelf, cleaning products, beauty products, whatever it is, that just because it's on the shelf means that it's safe. And unfortunately, the FDA does not even regulate the ingredients that are in cosmetics. So any cosmetic company can essentially put whatever they want in their cosmetics because it's not being regulated at all. There's a huge problem with talc being in beauty products, and talc is directly linked to ovarian cancer. And we're finally starting to catch up on this, and there are a lot of companies that are removing it. Another one is formaldehyde. You can find formaldehyde in a lot of really popular cosmetics. And the crazy thing too, and this really bothers me, is a lot of people think that if they're buying a really expensive, high quality beauty product, like for example, Dior, it's really expensive, right? And people think the more expensive it is, the more luxurious it is, the better it is for you. That could not be further from the truth. That has nothing to do with whether or not it's a clean product, if it's going to be healthy for you. And like we were saying before, because your skin is your largest organ, and you think about women are putting all of these products on their body on a daily basis. Women are exposed to, I think it's something like 160 different chemicals on a daily basis. And we don't have any studies yet as to what's happening with the mixture of all those different chemicals in the body, let alone women are not even thinking about putting all these different things on, because you think about, you shower in the morning, so it's in your body wash, in your lotion, even in the strips of your shaving of your razor, also in that. And then you think about all the different makeup products that women are putting on, perfume. I mean, so by the time she's showered and gotten ready for the day, she's already been exposed to like 50 different chemicals in those products.
And then you go make an espresso, and then you use an aluminum pan.
And then you bake your eggs in that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to tie this into metabolic health. I mean, you talked about the hormonal issues, autoimmunity, but there's this adage, and I know you know this, the solution for pollution is dilution, right? So we think about these perfluoro compounds and the fragrances. One way that the body can sequester these is in fat. And so there's this whole contamination theory of obesity that's emerging. So yeah, I mean, the studies are showing that there's a connection with weight gain as a way to sort of sequester and buffer the body from these compounds. So,
well, Mark Hyman, I don't know if he's the one that coined the term, but he talks about these a lot. They're called Obesogens. And essentially, yeah, they are chemicals that are stored in the fat, and then they are disrupting our hormones, and our hormones are part of our metabolism. And if our metabolism is off, our hormones are off, then it's gonna drive hunger and cravings. And so you're gonna see weight gain and all sorts of other issues, like we were saying earlier, cancer, autoimmune disorders. If your thyroid's not working correctly, that's gonna affect the way that your metabolism works and the way that you metabolize your food.
Really important point. So what brands, when it comes to cosmetics, do you like? I mean, there's resources, you point people to ewg.org.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
But is there your personal favorites, like top 2 or top 3 that people can go look for?
Yeah, so brands that I really love for makeup that are clean and non-toxic are ILIA, Kosas, and there's another brand called Tower 28 that I really love. Oh, and RMS is a really good one as well. I've been using all those products for years. I think there's a misconception that if it's a natural, non-toxic company, that it's not gonna work very well. When I first started getting into this around like it's like 15 years now. Yes, I was buying my makeup at Whole Foods, and there was like 3 brands, and they really didn't work that well. But the industry has really changed. There's a lot of companies now that are online and aware of what's happening, and they don't want to be exposing women to all these chemicals, and they are creating better products that are comparable, if not better, to the Dior's, the Chanel's, like all of the really expensive ones that people love and use.
Really important point. Those bigger brands, are they almost more complicit in putting more chemical? I mean, are they aware of this stuff, or? I
think there's both things happening at the same time. I think a lot of companies and a lot of people are not fully aware of what's happening, because what we were saying earlier, a lot of people just don't make the connection. I have found that when you start getting into health, it's a slow progression of, you start with your diet and you start looking at food, and then you start realizing, oh, these products I'm putting on my body, oh, the stuff that I'm using to clean my laundry with, the stuff that I'm cooking, it's a slow progression that you start waking up to. And so I think a lot of people are not even aware or thinking about their exposure to these products in the sense of what they're spraying on themselves, what they're putting on. But I also do believe that, there is a lot of information out there now, and a lot of these companies do know, but the problem is that we live in a society where money is put over the health of the people. They're more concerned about making money. They're more concerned about their bottom line. A lot of the ingredients that are in these products, and this could be said for food and cosmetics, act as preservatives because they want them to be able to stay on the shelf for longer. And there's no sort of health benefit to it. It's just so that they can make more money.
Interesting. So I was going to ask you about, why would talc and formaldehyde be in this? That's more of a preservative type?
I think so. The talc one, I might mess this up, but talc is a powder, and I think it's more something about the application, because talc is found a lot in like face powders and stuff, so like blushes and things like that. So it's more about the application. So yeah, it could be a couple different things, whether it's preservative or the way that it actually applies and like sits on the skin. That can also be another thing.
Or is it driver delivery, like in a lotion, something?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is even scarier. I mean, this, I think, is a nice segue into the bigger problem here, and that is that people, again, go to the store, think if it's sold, it must be safe, it must be regulated. But there's a great book, I don't know if you've read it, called Fateful Harvest.
No.
It's about a story about how chemical companies actually sell their chemicals to fertilizer manufacturers to dump their chemicals so they don't have to do environmental, to dump it safely. And so it makes you really start to question these, and this is perfectly legal. So if you have a aluminum smelter and you're like, all right, I need to get rid of all these toxic chemicals, it's gonna be a lot of money for you to do it right. You could sell it for half the price to a fertilizer company, and that's going in our food. And this is perfectly legal. So this stuff is going on in fertilizer, this is going on in cosmetics, it's going on in our food. And there's a lot of different regulations with regards to what happens here in the US versus in Europe and things like that. So I would love for you to speak to, what sort of categories of things are allowed here versus in Europe, and maybe help people connect the dots with the big issue with regards to regulation and all that.
Yeah, and actually to piggyback on that a little bit, so candy bars are sold, if they're expired, they are sold to farmers to feed their livestock. So they'll throw candy bars with the wrappers on into the food. Have you seen this?
Wrappers on?
Yes.
Holy smokes.
It's really crazy. And then they'll feed them to the pigs and the cattle, et cetera, to fatten them up. I mentioned this earlier, but there is a misconception that if it's on the shelf, that it has been vetted for and it's safe. But people don't understand that the USDA and the FDA, they're not regulating in the way that we think that they are. They're playing somewhat of a role regulating, but the FDA admitted, this was probably maybe 10 years ago or so, but that they didn't even have the manpower to approve every single additive that was being put in our food. And so what's happening is it's being put on the manufacturers to approve it, and then they just give, little paperwork to the FDA see, we're showing that it's safe. But it's what's that saying? It's the
dose that makes the poison?
Well, that one too, but also the fox guarding the hen house, is that what it is? Right. Where it's, the companies themselves are the ones that are regulating themselves. Right. And so a lot of times what happens is, it's kind of a free-for-all, so we're allowing all these ingredients and these additives in our food, and then later, if there's enough of events and they can prove that it's been causing harm to people, then they'll take it off the shelves later, and this happens a lot. And what's happening, more specifically with our food, is that our food is being produced with the money for these corporations in mind, not the health of the people. A lot of these ingredients that are being added, similarly to what I said about cosmetics, these additives, preservatives, emulsifiers, it's to make the food look more appetizing, or to sit on the shelf for longer so that they can make more money. And a lot of these additives that we have in the US in our foods are banned in other countries. So famously in the UK, food dyes are regulated, or actually they're banned in the UK because they found that it causes hyperactivity in children. Well, in the US, we allow them. So food dyes look like yellow number 5, blue number 6, things like that on the label. So companies like Kraft Macaroni and Cheese, if they want to sell in the UK, they have to reformulate their foods in order to be legally sold in the UK. So what you have now is Kraft Macaroni and Cheese making the Kraft Macaroni and Cheese for the American children, where it has yellow number 5, dye number 6, whatever the coloring is. And then in the UK, you look at the ingredients, they're super simple. It's just like cheddar cheese. They color it with paprika and curcumin, I think it is, which is turmeric. They're using healthier ingredients in other countries because they don't allow them in other countries, but here in the US, we allow them.
That is so crazy that phenomenon, that they're able to do that and still be profitable, presumably in the UK or Europe.
Yeah.
And that consumers don't demand higher quality. I guess it's just awareness. That's why we're having this conversation, to bring people.
Yeah. It starts with education, because a lot of people are not even aware of this even happening. And I think the more people that understand this is happening, the more angry we're going to get, and we're going to demand better from our food companies.
Mm-hmm. And start voting with your dollar. I mean,
yes.
buying purchasing products from companies that aren't putting this stuff in the food.
Yeah.
And eventually they'll wake up. Just like, when Whole Foods first came around, I think it was Wild Oats beforehand in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
And that pivoted the entire grocery industry, right?
Yeah.
Safeway now has an organic section, Ralph's has an organic section. So as long as there's momentum, we can shift, consumer behavior will shift corporate interests because they want to go where the puck is going. But just to finish off on one thing, and then I want to get to the problems with food colorings. when we think about these toxins, there was some research in an endocrinology journal. People think, well, it's just low dose. Like, come on, Courtney, it's just like a small amount. It's not that big of a deal. But these compounds, as you alluded to, interfere with our immune system, our endocrine system. They don't bind to the sex hormone binding globulins or albumin like our own hormones do. So they're free floating. They can bind to these estrogen receptors. So it's not, people think, well, it's just a small amount, but it can, even a nano or picogram level is impacting these hormonal systems, right? And so that's a big concern, is estrogen and lower testosterone when you're exposed to these compounds.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of phytoestrogens in different food. Well, okay, so in certain foods, like soy, contain phytoestrogens, which cause our estrogen in our body to increase. But also there's certain things in our food that are causing higher levels of estrogen as well. So like BPAs, for example, which is found in plastic. It's a chemical that is also known to be estrogenic, which means that it causes our body to create more estrogens. And we have a huge problem with this, especially with men, because men and women both have estrogen. Women are supposed to have more estrogen, but if women have too much estrogen, it can actually lead to breast cancer and other issues. And then for men, they're supposed to have lower estrogen and higher testosterone. But if you have more estrogen, it's going to lower your testosterone. So that's a huge problem from a metabolic and health standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't dove into this research in depth. Is it affecting aromatase and stuff like that? Or is it just hitting the estrogen receptor?
I don't actually know that. I don't know. Yeah.
I'd be curious to look it up. But getting back to food packaging, this is another thing. Like a lot of people are keen on looking at labels, and you do great grocery store tutorials to help people understand this. But I think the packaging, all that like slick lining, that probably has a lot of these, whether it's microplastics or perfluoro compounds. Do you think about that and educate people about how to, like, what packaging to avoid or different brands in terms of that?
Yeah, so this is something newer that I'm starting to dive into. I mean, it's something I've known about for a long time, but I'm trying to research better so that I can educate my audience. But this is a huge concern. I mean, you even think about like takeout containers like this. So this one doesn't have it. But normally when you see these kind of packaging, you'll see kind of like a plastic lining on it. The problem with the exposure to all these plastic linings, the plastic containers and the food, et cetera, they contain different organic compounds called BPAs or BPSs. And a lot of people know about BPAs, and so a lot of companies are now marketing like, hey, this is BPA free, but what people don't understand is that just because it's BPA free doesn't mean that it doesn't have all the other chemicals that are in plastic. And what the issue is plastic itself, because it contains all these different organic compounds that when heated up or exposed to heat actually causes them to leach out of the plastic and into whatever the food is. So you think about, you're putting hot food in here. The plastic is being heated up and then it's going to leach into food and then you're going to consume that. Same with coffee cups, like Starbucks, et cetera. It has a plastic lining in it and then you're putting hot coffee in there and then it's leaching into the food. And this is a huge problem that I think a lot of people are not even thinking about at all.
It's crazy. All right, so if you're on the road, you're traveling, you're gonna hit up Starbucks or a coffee shop. What do you bring? I see you have a tumbler, which is good, like a stainless steel tumbler. Yeah. Do you bring that and say, hey, fill this up here? Or do you request like a for here mug? How do you navigate that practically?
Yeah, so I usually, either request a for here mug, or when I travel, I usually bring a cup with me. I also wanna say that I really practice balance and I try not to stress too much, and I really remind myself on a daily basis that I'm doing the best that I can. And I don't want to give people an illusion that I'm perfect. I mean, I just recently went on a trip and I forgot to bring a cup with me and I got coffee from Starbucks for 2 days, and it just is what it is. It's more about the awareness and making better decisions when you can and doing it as much as possible, because coming back to the dose makes the poison argument, yes, but also no, because you have to think about, we're being exposed and inundated on such an insane level right now that it's hard to keep track of. And so wherever we can be mindful, we need to be, but then we also need to be kind with ourselves and be like, you know what, we're doing the best that we can. So I'm bringing the stainless steel cups wherever I can. I'm going to the farmer's market and trying to buy whole real foods and avoiding all these packaged products. And I'm not cooking on nonstick cookware. And I'm really trying to not buy a lot of stuff in takeout containers, but also knowing that sometimes it happens. I'm human. I live in the modern world and I'm doing the best I can.
Right. Because if you get too orthorexic, then it's like no one wants to hang out with you, right? And you become worried about everything. So yeah, these mitigation, it's helpful to be aware of, but you're right. I had coffee today in a mug that probably had microplastics. I just got an espresso and slammed it, but whatever, it's life. So.
Sometimes we just, we do the best we can. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about like ingredients to avoid on labels. When people are buying food for their kids, there's stuff in there sometimes. What are some top 5 things that we should definitely avoid in a packaged food, whether it's chips, crackers, bread, tortillas? I know you talk a lot about that.
Yeah, okay, well first of all, I wanna give my top tips on navigating, and I think this will make it a little bit easier than people having to remember exact ingredients. So my number one rule is when you're at the grocery store and you're looking at a label, if you could technically buy all the ingredients in that packaged food while you're at the grocery store and make it at home, then it's fair game. But if you're looking at this and you're like, what is TBHQ and where would I even source that? Like, how would I buy that to make this at home? Put it back on the shelf. But if you're looking at, for example, I really like the brand Simple Mills, because you look at the ingredients and you're like, oh, I could buy all of this. It's like rosemary extract, it's almond flour, sea salt, like everything in that. So if you could technically make it at home, that package is fair game. Another one is if your grandparents would not recognize this as food, then don't buy it. Like if I brought a Twinkie home, my grandmother, like back in the day, obviously now would probably know what it is, but you got to think about how like our grandparents grew up eating. My grandmother would be like, how did you even make this? What's in this? You don't recognize it as real food. So those are kind of my ways of navigating the grocery store. Also another one, if it was once alive, then it's fair game to eat. So because you can apply that to produce, to animals, etc. You want it to be as close to whole real food as possible. But again, like I was saying, we live in modern times. It's not sustainable to say never buy anything in a package. A lot of foods are processed these days. The difference is you don't want to be buying the hyper processed foods where, what I was saying with the Twinkies, you don't even know how that became a food. Like what even is...
How does that process work? That'd be interesting.
Like what even is that, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my way of navigating. I would say as far as ingredients that you really want to avoid, seed oils is a really big one. We have replaced really good healthy fats like butter, coconut oil, olive oil with these highly processed seed oils like canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil. What's another big one that they use? I mean, I guess those are the big ones.
Cottonseed oil.
Yes. Oh yeah, cottonseed oils and chips and stuff. That would be probably number one. I would say avoid that. If you're buying chips, look for chips that are made with avocado oil, or sometimes they make them with olive oil. Same with crackers. Look for a good healthy fat that they're using and try to avoid the seed oils. That's a really big one. Another one is high fructose corn syrup. I will say, I think a lot of people are waking up to this. Actually, my producer and I were at the grocery store the other day because I do these grocery store videos that I post online where I show people how to read ingredient labels and what to look for. And we were specifically looking for products that contain high fructose corn syrup. And we were at Target, which I was like, oh, Target's going to be loaded with all these high fructose corn syrups. And we actually had a kind of a hard time finding it. So I think people are waking up to some of these ingredients, but something that food industry loves to do is when people wake up to an ingredient not being that great, then they start replacing it with something else that's not really any better. So I'm seeing a lot of these products now being replaced with agave, which is being marketed as healthier, but agave is actually higher in fructose than high fructose corn syrup is. And we know agave is really hard on the liver. And high fructose corn syrup is being linked to the reason why we have so much non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Is from that. And do you think that's the liquid calories? Like
Yes.
the high fructose corn syrup in sodas and things like that?
I do. I think it's a level of that, but it's also because high fructose corn syrup and agave, like I was saying, is higher in fructose than it is in glucose. And glucose is the body's main source of energy. That's what we use to produce ATP. It's why how we can burn it off. But fructose is a little bit differently, and it just goes straight to the liver. And so what's happening is it's not being metabolized and burned off. It's just going straight to the liver and putting a burden on the liver and then being stored as fat.
Which is no good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I can't remember the statistic, but by like 2050, a majority of the population is going to have NASH or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, fatty liver, and there's not enough livers to go around. You only have one liver. And when it's infiltrated with fat and gets fibrotic, then that's a major problem.
Yeah, and this is an issue that we have only seen in the last, I'm probably gonna get the time frame a little bit off, but I think it's the last like 40 or 50 years. Before that, we didn't even have the term non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. People got fatty liver disease from alcoholism, and now we're seeing children at really high rates being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's really frightening.
Yeah. I mean, when you and I were learning biology in school, there was type 1 and adult onset type 2 diabetes. Now it's just called type 2 diabetes because children are getting type 2 diabetes. But 20, 30 years ago, that was not the case.
It was not even an issue. And now we are blaming all of these, we're blaming all these foods that we've been eating for thousands of years on modern chronic diseases. Like there's this attack on butter and red meat and eggs saying that these are all unhealthy. We have been eating these foods for thousands of years as humans, but our food has drastically changed in the last 50 years. And this is what's causing all these chronic disorders and diseases that we're seeing now.
Right. So we interviewed Nina Teicholz, the author of Big Fat Surprise, a few years ago, and she talks about why these seed oils are problematic. The hexanes and different solvents used to extract them is one thing. There might be residual levels in them. The other hypothesis is that they're easily oxidizable and so forth, and so that if they get incorporated into, say, your low-density lipoprotein, LDL, bad cholesterol, that it becomes oxidized. From your perspective and your research, why don't you want to consume the industrial seed oils, the canola, cottonseed, etc.?
Yeah, so one is they're highly processed. So I urge everyone listening to just YouTube the way that canola oil is made. It's disgusting. They have to add these solvents in there. They have to deodorize it because apparently the plants smell so rancid that they can barely breathe in there. And they have to deodorize it because people would not consume this oil if it tasted and smelled this rancid. So there's all these, it's very highly processed. Not to mention, it's much higher in omega-6s than it is omega-3s. And this is part of the problem, is that you want a ratio of higher omega-3s to omega-6s. And in these seed oils, it's reversed. The omega-6s are much higher. And when your omega-6s are higher in the body and in the oil, it's going to lead to inflammation. So that's really the biggest issue, is leading to inflammation.
Right. And a lot of people are unaware of that. There's the omega-3 index test. You generally recommend people do that to enumerate or quantify the ratios of EPA, DHA, and then omega-6s in their red blood cell. Do you ever recommend that?
I actually don't know about that test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. $49 test for people, just to see. Because I stopped taking fish oil for a little while.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I have backyard chickens, I have all this. My omega-3 index should be super high. It was like 5.4%. And the average American is like 4.7. So, I don't know. I think it's interesting for people because a lot of us do eat organic and grass-fed in this. Yeah. But that's a helpful tool. So I didn't know if you were...
I've never even, I should look into that. I didn't even know about that test, so.
Yeah, kind of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, fragrances in cleaning products. This is huge at home. You spray Windex or whatever it is. We have the unnamed brand laundry detergent that I used. That I used. So these things are everywhere. And why are they a problem? They're fragrances.
Yeah, so fragrance is a huge concern. Fragrance is actually similar to natural flavors. If anyone's aware of natural flavors, there's any number of thousands of different ingredients that could be under natural flavors umbrella. And it's the same with fragrances. And that's the biggest issue, is that it's just a term that companies use. And I understand the reasoning behind it because they want to protect their proprietary blend. But the problem is that there are thousands of different unregulated chemicals that could be under that word fragrance. And what we're understanding is fragrances are having an effect on our endocrine, or they're disrupting our endocrine systems. And what happens is you're getting infiltrated in so many different ways, whether it's, if you're using these on your clothing and on your sheets, so you think about, you're hopefully sleeping 8 hours a night, so then you're getting exposed for 8 hours every night. Your skin is absorbing all the fragrance from that into your body. Also the clothing that you're wearing, so if you're working out and you're sweating, you're gonna heat it up, you're gonna get more exposure to whatever is in the clothing. And then also the spraying of the cleaning products, you're getting infiltrated in your lungs, so it's going into your lungs. Another big concern is pets, and if you have small children, if you're using, Fabuloso or something, sorry to call them out, but to mop your floor, and then your kid is crawling around on the floor, your dog is, four paws and sniffing around all the time, they're constantly smelling in that fragrance, which we know now has an effect on our endocrine system. So like what we were saying earlier, it's phytoestrogenic effect on the body and raising our estrogen levels in our body, which we now know can lead to infertility, to different cancers, to autoimmune disorders. And then we're wondering why we're seeing all of these disorders raise in such crazy numbers right now.
And in children, and just for people don't know, obesity rates in dogs have started to increase in parallel obesity rates in adults. So it's like, is it these chemicals? Is it that they're not getting exercise or eating crappy food? Probably a combination of all that.
I think it's multifaceted. I think it's all of this happening at once. We're being infiltrated with all these different chemicals, and then we're eating really highly palatable, highly processed foods, and we're not being satisfied anymore. We have nutrient deficiency, so we're overeating because we're trying to compensate for that lack of nutrients in the food. There's a lot of things happening all at once.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So fragrances, and you do see those often in cosmetic cleaning products, shampoos. It'll just say fragrance.
Oh yeah.
So look out for that, right?
Yeah, and actually, I'm so grateful to have someone that helps me clean my house. And I've always asked her to use, I really like Branch Basics because they don't use any fragrances. I've found it to be really effective. And I've asked her to just use Branch Basics. And there was a time recently where I came home and I was like, I smell something super chemical. And I texted her and I was like, hey, can you please, just make sure you only use the Branch Basics or whatever. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I used Windex this time. I couldn't find it or whatever. But I'm so sensitive to it now that I can smell it immediately when I walk in my door. And all of those scents, I think we have been, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like duped or brainwashed into thinking that everything has to smell really good and everything needs to be scented, and it doesn't. If you have a really good air filter in your home and you clean and you vacuum and you make sure to spray everything down and you take out your trash, your place is not going to smell bad. It just doesn't need to smell like roses and whatever this smells like all the time,
The fake chemicals. You bring up a great point. I wanted to weave in that story. It's really hard to find someone that will help you clean that does not use all the commercial products. And that's why, in my house, I just clean it myself because, at first you interview someone like, oh yeah, we'll use your stuff. And then they bring their own stuff in. And then like you said, you walk in your house, you're like, what is this smell?
I'm like, it smells, I'm opening all the windows just being like, because it gives me a headache now.
Yeah.
When you think about, this is another thing that I notice every time I'm at the grocery store, when you walk down that, I just call it the endocrine disruption aisle, where it's all the laundry, the cleaning products, etc. I mean, you get hit with a wave of all these scents. Those scents are having a huge impact on our bodies in many different ways: weight gain, cancer, infertility.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And sadly, many people who do cleaning, whether it's in hotels or whatever, it's been my experience, and I think the research shows this, they have weight issues and chronic health issues.
Yes.
So not only is it impacting the hotel occupant, but the more important thing is the workers that are doing this day in, day out. Their exposure must be very high.
I think about this all the time with a woman that helps me, and I've been trying to educate her. I actually even bought her a set of the Branch Basics cleaning products because for me, I have mine at home, and so I'm like, use my products at home or whatever, but I bought her a set to take to her other houses because I was like, you're exposed to all these different chemicals on a day-to-day basis. You're breathing them in and you're getting them on your body, and I'm really concerned about people that are exposed to that all the time. Was
she receptive to it, or?
She actually told me that she liked Branch Basics better. She was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's super effective. And she really liked it. So I think she's using it now. That's great.
I mean, I wish more people would get that message. It's really important. So let's see, we have all these compounds. Did we talk about parabens yet?
We didn't. I don't know too much about them to speak into depth about them, but I do know that parabens, you'll see them on cosmetics as like methylparaben, etc. There is a direct link to those with breast cancer and I think some other cancers as well. And they're used as a preservative in products.
I see.
Yeah.
When you went like this, it made me think of, at the gym, I see a lot of women put their iPhone near their breast. Oh, have you dove into that research? It's pretty scary.
No, I haven't dove too much into that research, but I do know it's a huge concern. Either putting it here or putting it in your pockets here, right near your reproductive organs is a big problem for men because they're putting their phones here and here, and it's affecting their sperm counts from the radiation. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff that we need to be cognizant of,
And there was a study that came out recently that women are being exposed to more BPAs in our sports bras, in our fitness gear. And you think about it again, I know I keep saying this, but you're sweating, you're heating it up, and then your pores are open. And so it's going directly into your bloodstream. And again, these are just things that people are not thinking about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And there's even now, you'll see this if you go to REI or big box fitness store, it will say, I can't remember the verbiage they use. It's something like it's like a non-smell. So what they do is they put like they put antibiotics in the clothing, and they market it as, oh, this will not smell. And so what I do for my exercise stuff, sometimes I'll just buy merino wool, because for whatever reason, the wool doesn't like take on the odors of like smelling and stuff. So like my hiking gear, that's what I use.
That's smart.
But it's crazy. So like you're literally putting antibiotics on your skin to prevent the future smell, but that could disrupt your whole skin microbiome from getting to your body.
I think as humans, we forget that there is so much about the body that we don't understand still. We know a lot, but we are realizing the more that we are finding out how much we don't know. And one of those being that our cells are made up more of bacteria than we are of human cells. We are living organisms with living organisms on our entire body. And when we think about spraying all these sanitizers and the antimicrobials and using these wipes everywhere we go, and during COVID when we were going to every store and they're making you pump out the hand sanitizer, I refused all of those because we need this good bacteria in our body. We need it for our immune systems. We need it for our overall health, for the functioning of our body. These bacteria do so many processes in our body, and I think a lot of processes that we're not even aware of yet, and we are just killing them off with all these antimicrobial stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. What about feminine products, tampons and things like that? I have recently been made aware that even toilet paper has like microplastics in it. So presumably tampons do as well. Is there a good brand for feminine products for ladies?
Yeah, this is something I'm really passionate about. I did a video about this now probably 10 years ago, which is so crazy to think. So if you're buying just conventional like tampons, not only are those not 100% cotton, they're usually mixed with rayon and other like microplastics or microfibers in there. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're buying tampons that are 100% cotton. But another concern about that is cotton is very highly sprayed with glyphosate in this country and other pesticides and herbicides. If you're unaware of what glyphosate is, it's also known as Roundup, which is it's deemed a possible human carcinogen, but I think at this point we can pretty much say we know that it causes cancer. And it's being sprayed really heavily on cotton. And what's happening is the skin down there is highly vascular, which means that there's a lot of blood vessels going through there. And when you are exposing your body to something that is sprayed with glyphosate, and also it's bleached oftentimes to give it that really white color. Another thing is titanium dioxide. They put titanium dioxide in the tampons to make it really, really white. For some reason, we are so obsessed with the look of things that a lot of like our food products and the tampons, etc., we're trying to make them look visually appealing to people, which is so crazy. Anyways, titanium dioxide is being linked to infertility, and then we're putting it right there near our reproductive organs. So you want to make sure that you're looking for 100% organic cotton tampons. Another one, I really like to use the cup, which is a silicone little cup device, and it's reusable, it's more eco-friendly, but if you want to use tampons or even pads as well, just make sure they're 100% organic cotton.
Okay. And it might be a little bit more brown, but who gives a crap,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Since we're on this topic, what about contraception? A lot of people are now aware that birth control pills are synthetic estrogens, progestins, they decrease testosterone, they're linked with all these issues. And then you have, okay, fine, I'll get an IUD. A lot of those have progestins or estrogens synthetic in there. So where do you steer people towards like contraception?
Yeah, this is also something I'm very passionate about. I have a couple podcast episodes about this specifically. I believe that hormonal birth control is one of the worst things to ever happen to women because it completely shuts off our ovulation. It also deters us from picking healthy partners. Because when you are on these synthetic hormones, your own ovulation is shut off and we don't actually have periods, we don't ovulate, and our hormones are different, so we are sensing and smelling different pheromones than if we were not being synthetically attacked, for lack of a better word. I have a couple girlfriends who, when they got off birth control and they were with their partners for a long time, when they got off birth control, they smelled different to them, they were disgusted by them, which is really crazy, but there's studies now to show this. Like that was an anecdotal example, but there's studies that show that this is happening. And not to mention, it is masking symptoms of what is actually going on. So A lot of women are put on birth control when they're 13, 14 to control or balance their hormones. We're not balancing any hormones. What we're doing is we're just completely suppressing our own hormonal cycles and replacing them with synthetic ones. So if you have an issue going on there and then you just put a Band-Aid over it, it's not going to go away. It's actually going to come back way worse when you go off birth control. Not to mention, for women who want to get pregnant when they come off, birth control suppresses things like selenium and zinc, really important nutrients that we need in order to be fertile and to get pregnant. So what happens often is if a woman's been on birth control for 10 years and then she comes off of it and wants to get pregnant right away, she struggles for a year or two because she's so nutritionally depleted and her cycle is so off. So what I like to do for contraception, obviously there's condoms. I know if you're married or if you're just in a monogamous relationship and you don't want to use that, Natural Cycles is a really great option that I love. It's an FDA cleared app for birth control, meaning that the FDA pretty much recognizes it as a form of birth control, that if it's used correctly, I believe it's 98 or 98% effective. And what I love is I wear an Oura ring to track my sleep. And the Natural Cycles actually links to my Oura ring, and it takes an average of my temperature overnight. So by the time I wake up in the morning and I link my Natural Cycles app to my Oura ring, it will tell me whether or not I'm fertile that day. And so that's really how you know. So if I get a red day, which means that I'm ovulating, then you know either to abstain from sex or use a condom, or you make sure that you're really careful.
Interesting. How is that different than the Daisy? I know a lot of people are using that.
So the Daisy is another really great one. It's very similar in the sense that basically what's happening with Natural Cycles and with the Daisy is you're getting your basal temperature. Depending on where we are in our cycle, whether we're ovulating or we're menstruating, etc., our body temperature fluctuates. And so with the Daisy, what you do is you take your temperature first thing in the morning, your basal temperature, which means before you even get out of bed. So right when you wake up, you take your temperature and then you log it into an app, and that will determine whether or where you are in your cycle.
Because that window is only about 6 days.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so that's but a lot of people don't understand is we have been told that we can get pregnant any day of the month, but it's actually really about I would say more like a 5 to 8 day window, because there's a couple days where sperm can stay in the body because it stays in the body for a couple days. So there's probably about an 8 day window that you can actually get pregnant.
Interesting. Now for women that have irregular cycles, maybe they're athletes or they're dieting and things like that, is this still an effective strategy because the temperature fluctuations will still indicate ovulatory windows?
Yeah, so that's a little bit trickier. I actually, I used to travel for a really long time with bands, and my biggest struggle was this, because I was never on a consistent time schedule. It works better if you're on a consistent time schedule. I was traveling so much that I was in different time zones, and so that's also going to affect your body. If you're drinking a lot, so if you're hungover, that's also going to affect your body temperature. So there are things that will meddle with it. There's a great book, which I am blanking on the name right now, which I'm going to have to we'll put it in the show notes, where it goes fully into depth, all the different signs and symptoms of when you're in ovulation, when you're about to start ovulating, because there's discharge different times of the month, and so women can also make note of that and track that as well. So there's different ways of tracking it to make sure that you know. Women can also get ovulation strips, and they can pee on them, and it will tell you if you're ovulating or not.
Wow.
So that's another great one, yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm just curious, the clients and the friends who got off the pill and their partner's pheromones were not jiving with their natural inclinations, did they end the relationship? Did they continue with it? What happened?
So the two friends that I have, they actually both got divorced, but I want to be very careful and say, I don't think this was the main reason. There was also other issues, but it did become a big problem because they were kind of repulsed by their partners, their smell, just the way that they related to them. It's weird. We know, studies show that birth control affects your brain chemistry. So when you're off of it, you're going to be thinking and acting a little bit differently, and your ability to pick a good partner for yourself is going to be skewed when your chemicals are off balance.
That's such a good point. There was just a study that came out, I think 5 days ago, and it looked at women that are on hormonal birth control, and they tracked objectively levels of empathy. And women on birth control are less empathetic compared to women who are naturally cycling. So there was that, but then there's also this MHC, major histocompatibility complex, and for whatever reason, when the progestins are high, when you're taking the birth control, you're more you're mimicking the hormonal milieu of pregnancy. So you're attracting a spouse that is safe and whatever, versus when women are naturally cycling, they're more attracted to more masculine men. So it's like,
Wow.
it's the research is so interesting, and because so many women are on birth control, and then you also look at divorce rates are so high, you're like, wow, there has to be a connection here.
I absolutely think there is. And there's a huge conversation. We don't need to get too deep into this right now, but amongst a lot of women my age or my generation of wondering where all the masculine men are. I think there's a lot of different things happening right now. We were talking about the phytoestrogens in the food and in our products, et cetera, that are affecting testosterone levels. We know that testosterone levels are declining right now. That's a huge issue. But also too, women picking men that are less masculine and more, that don't have those attributions. I think this is all connected. It's becoming a society level issue.
Mm-hmm. And then if you look at the number of kids who are identifying as gender dysphoric or non-binary, you're like, what is going on here?
What's
because
happening?
the rates of prescription of puberty blockers, off-label use of different gonadotropin receptor agonists, it's like this has increased just like 300% in the last 5 years. You're like, something is going on, and I think it's important for us to start to talk about it,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, something is happening. I had a doctor on my podcast last year, Dr. Courtney Swan. She was also on Joe Rogan. And she's talking about the numbers of sperm counts are going down, testosterone levels are going down at crazy rates. A man in his 20s now has the amount of testosterone that a man in his 70s had back in like the 80s. That is how low our testosterone levels are now in our males. And this, obviously it's a concern from a fertility perspective, of course, but this goes so above and beyond that. Testosterone is your vitality, it's your life force, it's what determines whether or not you're healthy as a man. And so if our testosterone levels are really low in our men, what's happening to their overall health?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, metabolic health and all that. But the pill also tanks testosterone in women, I think 60%.
Yeah.
That was what's crazy. Okay, so we talked about all the bad stuff, right? And we talked about how to navigate the grocery store. Let's talk more about detox. I know that's kind of a loose term. Sauna, you mentioned an air freshener in the home, air filter. What about charcoal, things like that? Like, what do you recommend for people? Like, okay, you're traveling, you're having fun, you're having shrimp and bottom feeders. What do you bring, charcoal with you or anything like that? Or
I do. I always travel with charcoal, especially if I'm going to other countries, because if I'm exposed to anything, like a bacteria or parasite or something, and you won't always know, but if your stomach is upset, charcoal is actually so powerful that you can't even take it around any of your other supplements because it will just suck out all the nutrients from the supplements and your body won't be able to absorb it. So charcoal is a great option. Also, you mentioned sauna already, but this is really important. I don't want to skim it over. Getting some sort of sweat in every day, whether that be you go into a sauna, you can even just take a hot bath. I want to make this as accessible as possible. If you don't have access to a sauna, just throw a bunch of Epsom salts in a really hot bath to the point where you're sweating, and you want to create that sweat so that you can get all of these toxins out. Another great option is just moving your body every day, because when you're moving your body, not only are you sweating, but you're getting your lymph flowing as well, and your lymph system is basically the sewage system of your body that helps to release all these toxins out. Another one that I think a lot of people don't talk about, stop wearing antiperspirant deodorant. Your body needs to get all these toxins out, and one of the best ways, the most effective ways we do that is by sweating out through our armpits. Now, I'm not saying go around, smelling like a hippie, and you don't need to smell. There's a ton of amazing non-toxic deodorants that work really well. Agent Couture is my favorite. They make a great one for women. They also make a great one for men. And it's non-toxic, it's aluminum free, it's not antiperspirant, so you still sweat a little bit, but you don't stink. All of these are really important. Another thing is making sure that your liver is working optimally, because our liver is what is pushing all this out. So you want to support your detoxification pathways. I take a liver supporting supplement every day that has dandelion, milk thistle in it. These are all science-backed nutrients that help they basically help the detoxification pathways of our body to push out all the excess toxins.
Such a good point. What about NAC glycine? Are you a fan of that?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't really looked into NAC glycine. I know that it is really effective. Another one is glutathione. I do know glutathione really well. It's the body's master antioxidant. It's another great one for pushing stuff out of the body. There's also calcium D-glucarate, which I know binds to excess estrogen and pushes that out through the liver. So that's another really great one too.
Yeah, that's great points, excellent points. Who makes the charcoal that you like?
So I was taking Bulletproof for a long time, which I like his supplements, and then Symbiotica makes a really great one. I love that brand. And it's a liposomal one.
Oh, liposomal.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Which is great, yeah.
So, okay, you're gonna eat at a junky restaurant, like it's a birthday party, wedding, whatever. Do you take it before or after?
It kind of depends. If I remember, I'll take it before, or I don't really drink alcohol very much these days. But if I do, I will take charcoal before, and I'll also do glutathione or calcium D-glucarate, or maybe both, to help support the liver. Yeah, but you can take charcoal really anytime. You can take it before or after. Another great option, if you have food poisoning, take charcoal immediately if you can keep it down, because it can usually help push all that out too. Yeah.
Yeah. How come you don't drink?
I was a pretty big drinker when I was in college, and I guess maybe more until like recently. I really love wine, but there's so much research coming out right now about how it's a literal toxin. And we have been fed that alcohol is healthy in certain amounts, and you get the resveratrol from the red wine, etc. But what we're finding is that it's in such small amounts, and that the amount that you're getting is not even really enough to counteract all the other bad effects that alcohol is having on your body, especially the effects it's having on the brain.
And sleep.
Yes. Oh, that's a really big one. So I've been really struggling with my sleep lately in the last year, I would say, and I've been really trying to tackle this. And I've noticed, so I have my Oura ring, and whenever I drink alcohol, I get a terrible night's sleep. Even if I have one glass of wine, it affects me so much now that it's not worth struggling the next day.
Right. For that little 10-minute buzz that you might get or whatnot.
Yes, exactly. And there's other things now. I'm really enjoying these non-alcoholic elixirs. There's a brand called Kin Euphorics. And it's just, depending on which one you get, it's just a blend of different, there's one I really love. It has like B6, B12, GABA. It has a couple of these nootropics in there that give you kind of like a fun little buzz, and then you don't have the effects the next day.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Circling back to deodorant, I stopped wearing deodorant in 2018.
Yeah.
At first, like I admit, I smelled kind of bad, but my sauna practice has increased, and so I think that smell was a symptom to me that something was wrong. And I think some people are like, oh, I smell bad, so therefore I'm gonna wear deodorant. But we have to pay attention to these symptoms. Like if you're fatigued, what's your sleep like? Are you drinking alcohol? What's your food like? And if you smell bad, what's your food like? So I think it's important for people to kind of acknowledge that if there's these bad odors, like pay attention to it, change something.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is something that I noticed in my journey. So when I was younger and I wasn't eating that well, I wasn't eating that healthy, I was sweating a lot, and my BO smelled pretty bad. When I changed my diet and I got healthy, I forget to wear deodorant. I probably wear deodorant once a week, and I don't have any sort of smell. Although I will say, actually recently, I've been working with a functional medicine doctor just on a couple little things, one of them being sleep. And he has me on this protocol that was detoxing the crap out of my body. And I was like, oh my God, I've never even smelled these smells coming out of my body right now. And one of my calls with him, because we do telehealth, I was like, help me, I smell so bad. And he was like, you just got to ride it out. He's like, obviously wear deodorant, which is helping a little bit, but what's happening is my body is literally detoxifying right now, and it's leveled out. The last 2 weeks, it's really pretty much gone away, but that was my body going through something. I was getting rid of toxins, and the healthier you get and the more that you prioritize sweating and doing sauna and supporting your detoxification pathways and all this stuff, you're not gonna smell anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really good for people to hear, and to remember to take this stuff seriously,
Yeah.
That's crazy. So what type of smell? Was it like a chemically type smell, or?
Not chemically, but just like a BO smell that I literally have never smelled in my life. At first I was like, that's not me. And then I'm like, I'm alone. What is that smell? That is me, but I've never smelled that coming out of my body before. Just crazy BO smells. Which is not, I'm sure everyone listening is like, ew. Yeah. But it's just a normal part of life,
Right. I've had some clients who have had breast implants, and they said that they had this metallic taste often. And then when they got them removed, that went away. Wow. So these things are real.
That's another one is breast implant. What do they call that? It's breast implant disease? Illness. That's what it is. Yeah. yeah, a lot of women aren't realizing, once again, it's like these little things that we're being exposed to that we may not even be making the connection to our health. And a lot of women are realizing that the silicone or whatever the ingredients that are in those implants that are in their body is affecting their health. When you think about too, so I had this experience with my IUD, and it's kind of a similar thing where you have something foreign in your body that your body does not recognize. It shouldn't be there. So it's sending your white blood cells, it's sending all these things to attack it because it's like, what the heck is this? And it happens with the IUD because it's a foreign object, and the same thing with the breast implants.
It's crazy. Yeah, I was diving into the research on that, and there's like a biofilm that forms around it and scar tissue, and it gets calcified, and there's so much drainage, lymphatic, like going to the breast. So yeah, this is wild because it's so common, you know. Yeah. Courtney, we could probably talk for 3 hours on all these amazing topics. Really appreciate you coming on. Folks, now do you work one-on-one with people? Is that part of your business?
I used to. I don't right now. I might be doing that again, but right now I don't, yeah.
Okay. If people want to connect with you and your podcast, what's the best resource for them to look at?
Yeah, so I'm at Real Foodology on Instagram, and my podcast is also called Real Foodology, and that's where you can find me most. Yeah, I'm on TikTok too, but.
Oh, nice. How's that going, TikTok?
Good. I mean, I have a funny relationship with TikTok. I like Instagram better. And I'm kind of concerned about the China owning TikTok, and I don't know.
Privacy issues and stuff.
Exactly. But I still am on it. But I prefer Instagram. That's really where I spend my most time.
Yeah. Instagram's a good platform. Yeah. TikTok is interesting. Like, it's regionally dependent. So like the people in China see something totally different than what we see here, which is wild.
I was going to say that. I don't know if we have a moment to talk about it, but it's really, really interesting. And this is not a conspiracy. It sounds like it is, but this is actually what's happening. So in China, they're trying to encourage their youth to go after highly esteemed jobs like scientists, doctors, etc. So the algorithm in China favors doctors, scientists. So when children go on TikTok, they're seeing all of these, exactly. And then in the US, the algorithm is prioritizing people doing dances and weird pranks and all this stuff. And they also have a time limit in China. So you can't be on TikTok, or children can't be on TikTok past, I don't know what it is, like 9 p.m. or whatever it is. And I think they have a limit on how much time they're able to spend on there every day. We don't have a limit. Our algorithm is favoring all this dumb, stupid stuff. And then over in China, all their kids are like, oh, I want to be a scientist, or yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That is wild. If you think about the bigger implications and maybe, intent of that.
It's concerning.
Right. Because again, I think it's parents think, oh, my kid's on TikTok. All the kids are on TikTok. All the kids, their moms wash their clothes with this stuff. So it's like this perception that everyone else is doing it, so it's okay. Yeah. But yeah, we have to be aware of these things. So really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I'll put links to your resources below.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.